All right, Luke, here we go. So we had just finished talking about this concept that your nervous system is like the alarm system of your body. And when you get injured or your brain perceives a threat, it's going to ramp up, it's going to turn on this alarm system. Now this is helpful because it's going to lead us to produce some sort of response, to take the nail out of our foot, to get our ankle bandaged up. And normally, after this response is done and we deal with a threat, the system tends to calm back down, to go back to this normal resting level where it's simply monitoring what's going on. But in some people, this alarm stays elevated. It stays a little bit higher than it's intended to. And this can be for a variety of reasons, whether it's fear and anxiety about your pain, simply having pain that lasts for a while, receiving different explanations or treatments for your pain that haven't worked all that well can leave you with this higher alarm system. Now you might be asking at this point, well, how do we turn it down? How do we bring this extra sensitive alarm back to its normal level? Well, even just what we're doing right now, learning about your pain, can be helpful for decreasing that alarm sensitivity. Let me give you an example. So this is a type of scan called an MRI, and it's a specific type of MRI that tells us about activity in different parts of the brain. That's what these little red blobs are. It's showing us what parts of the brain are being activated during a given experience. A little bit of background on the person who's in this scan. So she was an individual that is experiencing ongoing back pain, much like you, and it's painful for her to move her back. The very top row of scans, this is her brain as she's just resting in the machine. And so there's no sort of activity in any of the lobes. Then in the second row here, she was asked to move her back. And as a result, all different areas of her brain light up. This is important because there's no particular area of our brain that produces pain. Because in some people, they might just say, well, let's cut out that area because I've been dealing with pain forever. Instead, your pain experience is made up of all different parts of your brain. And that's the reason why beliefs and attitudes about your pain and even memories, past experiences can have impact on your pain experience. Now in this third row, you might notice that there's less red blobs. Well, what happened between the second and third row is she experienced an education session much like we're doing right now, where she learned about her pain. She learned that it's indicative of a higher alarm than it is of injury. So this means the less blobs means that she's experiencing less pain. Her brain is perceiving less of a threat, and as a result of that, she's experiencing less pain. So education really is therapy, and it's the first step that we can take in order to begin dealing with this sensitized alarm system. But there's other things that we can also do. And exercise is one of the best things that we can do in order to start resetting this alarm system. Now, I don't mean that you have to go and run a marathon or you have to kayak down an entire river in order to get the benefits of exercise for your pain. Something as simple as a 20-minute walk a few times a week is enough to begin introducing your body to more and more movement and start to decrease the threat that your brain is perceiving with your back pain. You might be saying at this point, though, that, well, if I'm experiencing pain while I'm doing exercise or activity, aren't I injuring myself further? And there's a few misconceptions with this, but it's completely reasonable to have this thought and to have this understanding because most other points in our life, when we experience pain, it tells us, yeah, maybe we should stop doing what we're doing. If you break your leg, then you experience pain and you might not want to walk on it for a little bit. But remember that more than likely your tissues have healed. Most of our tissues in our body heal within 6 to 8 weeks, and some of them up to 3 months. But past that time, if you've had pain that's continued longer than that, it's not an issue with your tissues anymore. Instead, it's an issue with the way that your brain is perceiving the threat associated with it. this first concept of hurt does not always equal harm. It's interesting because we typically can think of examples where we have an injury and it's painful, maybe spraining your ankle. You notice the pain right after it, and you can see visually maybe there's a bit of swelling and there's some bruising around your ankle. So in this case, the hurt and the harm, they're equal. They're coexisting together. But there's some uncommon instances where, or rather common instances, but it's difficult to think about sometimes, instances where we can have pain in the absence of tissue damage. A good example might be something like an ice cream headache. When you're a kid and you are eager to go out to the ice cream truck and you get a nice big ice cream cone and then you eat it within a few seconds, you might notice that you begin to experience this searing headache that just hurts so badly, and then it goes away in a little bit. Now, certainly you weren't injuring your tissue as you ate that ice cream cone. You weren't injuring your brain by any means, but you absolutely experienced pain. And so in this case, you had pain in the absence of tissue injury. Equally uncommon for us to think about is that we can have tissue injury in the absence of pain. An example of this might be when you woke up one day and you notice a bruise on your leg that you have no idea how it got there. See that there are blood vessels that have ruptured and they've leaked into the surrounding tissue. That's what a bruise is. Certainly there's tissue damage that went on in order to produce that, but you have no recollection of a pain experience. So not every hurt equals harm. Equally, you can be sore but safe at the same time. Some people who have worked out for a while, they might know this familiarity when a day or two after getting a nice good workout in, they're a little bit sore. Now, this isn't cause for alarm in people who have been working out for a while, because they understand that this is completely normal. You've worked out your muscles in a good way, maybe in a way that they haven't experienced for a while, and now you just need to give it a little bit of time to heal and to go back to its normal level. And this is completely normal as you're beginning to engage in exercise with your painful back, is you could experience some soreness, but we want you to know that it's completely safe to go about this. So some people, they hear, oh, exercise is great. I'm going to go out and run 5 miles, having never run in my life. Now, you might think that's a good idea, and you might even run all 5 miles, pushing through the pain, gritting your teeth, no pain, no gain mentality. But then you find that you crash for the next several days, maybe even a week. You can't get out of bed, your pain is really debilitating. And then after you feel better, you might do that again. And it produces this sort of boom-bust cycle where you do a lot of activity and then you have to rest for a long time because you've gone too hard, too soon, or too quickly. The rule of twos is something that is helpful here, where you go too hard, too fast, too long, for too soon of a time that you give yourself to recover from. And so in instances like this, we want to think about pacing. This is where we break up activities into smaller chunks or smaller segments so we don't overshoot our pain experience and then have to rest for a couple of days and then overshoot it again and then have to rest again. On the flip side, there's some people that they may be really fearful or avoidant of pain at all. They've been told to let pain be their guide, and if they start to experience pain, to stop doing what they're doing. And so when they're doing an activity and they get right below this pain level, they stop because they don't want to experience pain. They don't want to go further and experience a bit of discomfort. In these cases, it's equally not as helpful because you aren't getting to the level that begins to tell your brain, hey, we don't need to be threatened by this, that we can experience a bit of soreness, but again, we're safe, sore, but safe. So where's the Goldilocks zone? Where should we be between the boom and bust and the not pushing up far enough? Well, we can think of it like nudging pain. If you grew up with siblings and you're the youngest maybe, you're familiar with wanting to annoy or prod your siblings maybe a little bit. Now, would it be beneficial for you to run up to them and all at once start poking them and pulling on their hair gently and pulling out the paper that they're working on? Well, probably not. You might get slapped or at least sent away and yelled at. But if you wanted to be skillful about annoying them, you might run up and poke them in the side and then run away. It was enough of an irritation that you knew that it got on their nerves, but not so much that they had a big reaction. A few minutes later, you go back and you pull gently on their hair and then you run away. Again, you know that it got them going, it got them mad, but it wasn't so much where you got walloped. This is kind of the same way that we can think about our pain. I know it's a funny example, but what we're doing is we are gently over time trying to nudge into our pain a little bit and back off. Nudge again and back off, nudge again and back off. And over time, we begin to see that we can nudge further and further. We start day by day taking one task and going a little bit further, seeing how we respond, going a little bit further. If I asked you how you eat an elephant, you might say, well, one bite at a time. And that's exactly right. We're going to start small, and you're going to incrementally get up. And we see this phenomenon in all other aspects of our life as well. I have a Scandinavian heritage, and so I have very fair skin. I come from a region that doesn't get a ton of sun throughout the year, but in the summer, we do get a fair amount of sun. So as a result, at the beginning of summer, I can go outside and be in the sun for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before I start to get sunburned. But by the end of the summer, as I build up a bit of a tan, I can be outside for several hours before getting a sunburn. It's the exact same thing as this. I've begun to nudge my capacity to get more and more sun without experiencing the effects of a sunburn. This is the same way with your pain, that we're going to nudge it a little bit more and more over time so that we can do more without experiencing pain. Now, another thing that can be helpful to deal with your pain is medications. And although this isn't within my scope to talk to you about, I can urge you to go to your doctor to talk about what are some medications that could be helpful for you to get going, to get over the barrier that you might be experiencing right now with getting going, getting moving, because you're in a lot of pain. Over time, though, these medications should be tapered back and eventually ceased as they're not needed anymore and you're able to deal with your pain effectively on your own. So, did you know that your pain or your brain is sort of like a pharmacy? I used to work in a pharmacy, and we would have hundreds and hundreds of medications in the back with all different uses. And even some of those medications, they overlapped in their usage. So some medications used for one thing, but also for another thing. Your brain is very much the same way. It has a lot of different chemicals, very healthy, beneficial chemicals in it that deal with different aspects of our body. And one of those aspects is our pain. So we have these healthy painkillers within our body that get to deal with dangers or threats that come in from our nervous system, and it gets to dampen that pain experience and not perceive it as that big of a deal. Take, for example, stubbing your toe. While you might experience pain for a few minutes afterwards, you begin to notice over the course of the rest of the day, this pain decreases a ton or it completely goes away at all. It's because your brain, using the chemicals, these healthy painkillers, so to speak, in your brain, they are telling you that it's really no big deal that you've stubbed your toe. It's not that big of a threat. You can calm down. There's no danger in this. And so in a healthy brain, in a brain that has a ton of these chemicals, then they can be activated and it can deal with that danger message. So what happens when these dry up? We think of this as a dry brain, where our pharmacy, it's been on back order and we're out of stock of a lot of medications. And this might be going on with you experiencing low back pain that has lasted for a while. Your painkiller supply has sort of dried up. Now, this is completely normal. It does this to protect you. And the reason is that it wants you to change something. It wants to get you to change something about how you're dealing with your pain. But how do we turn this dry brain back into a wet brain where we can decrease the threat or the danger that's associated with your movement coming in? Well, We begin that with knowledge. Much like we're doing right now, an education session can be helpful to start to make this brain turn from a dry brain into a wet brain. Other things like exercise, sleep, relaxation, and goal setting can be helpful in order to help to make this brain more wet so that we can deal more effectively with these danger messages that are coming in. Another thing that we can do is manual therapy. So adjustments or massage can be helpful as an adjunct or assisting you along your way in order to deal with your pain.